What's going on, fellas? It's Thursday night. We got some Thursday night football, some NBA DFS going on. Lots of sports to talk about today. And here we have our NFL Thursday night football live stream. We're going to hop through all of our projections here for tonight, our player pool, our favorite captains, some ownership discussion, all that sort of fun stuff. So let me go ahead and share my screen here in our projections. And you can see there's been some updates to the poll. First and foremost, do have Justin Jackson active for tonight. We've also seen movement in both the over-under for this game and, of course, the spread. The spread has gone from 3.5 for the Chiefs down to 3, so a minimal change there. But in terms of the over-under, we've seen a 3-point increase. There's been a lot of sharp betting out there, betting on the over, so Vegas has adjusted that line. Like I said earlier on in the week, this was to be expected. These are two of the highest-powered offenses in the NFL, and overall, I think the line's appropriate now. That's where I had it in terms of my projections. So in terms of raw scoring, didn't change much. But I wanted to go ahead and show you guys that. So Vegas does agree with me there. You see that reflected with my projections. With that being said, not anyone going to be inactive tonight of note. Austin Eckler should be good to go. He is not officially active right now, but all signs, all beat reporters have said that he should be active. Justin Jackson is going to get a little bit more workload. He is, Eckler, that is dealing with a knee injury. He's been limited throughout practice the entire week. We've had a couple beat reporters say that they expect Jackson to get some work, Kelly, potentially even Roundtree to get a few carries. That might be a smokescreen, right? You hear Coach talk every single week. If Eckler is going to be active, I do expect him to be the bell cow back here. If anybody's going to steal any type of usage from Eckler, it is going to be Justin Jackson. It's pretty much Justin Jackson only. I have him projected right now for 7 touches in the game. Last game ended up getting 11 touches between rushes and passes. I do not expect Eckler to be that limited tonight. So a little bit of a smokescreen out there. In fact, I actually think Eckler is a better play now. It's gone from right around 34% ownership down to 22%. And at the captain, now he's single-digit owned. So if anything, it makes him a little bit more attractive in my book, especially for large field GPP type of contests. Let's move on to quarterback now. Both quarterbacks are essentially locks for tonight. I have both quarterbacks projected for over 21 fantasy points. And sure, they're coming in extremely high owned. Anytime you have over a 50-point total, essentially approaching 55, 60-point total like we have here, you're going to need those points at quarterback. So I've done a few builds before this. I've tinkered with my optimizer throughout the entire week, and fitting both quarterbacks not a problem. You're not able to take both quarterbacks and 2 stud players with them. You're kind of going to have to choose either an Eckler, a Hill, an Allen, someone in that range, and then build for the value. But that is going to be the optimal build for tonight, particularly with a 60-point over-under. We're going to get some of these peripheral level of players, whether it's a third-string wide receiver, a backup tight end, that kind of thing, that go out there, gets you some red zone usage, and potentially even get there in terms of PPR upside. So we're going to have to go ahead and save some salary. It's going to be one of those slates. Fading the quarterbacks is going to be a ticket to you losing your hat tonight. Let's just say that. If you don't play the quarterbacks, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Let's talk about a few of the running backs. If there's one position that I'm not prioritizing, it is going to be running back. Aside from Austin Eckler, who makes an interesting ownership pivot, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is about an average of play as it gets. He's going to see usage in this offense. He is on the favored side, which does give him a favorable game script. But overall, it's $7,000. There's other positions that I'm looking to spend up at. And just for $1,000 more, or even at that same type of price level, I can get a Mike Williams, who I have projected much higher than somebody like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And there's no doubt that in a 60-point over-under, Mike Williams has maybe an 8 or 9-point ceiling higher. 9-point higher ceiling than somebody like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So not somebody I will be prioritizing. I see over here as a yes in my captain pool. I would imagine that he doesn't make my captain pool come tonight. As we've seen that over-under rise and rise and rise from 50 to right around 54.5, it kind of takes him out of play. Justin Jackson, he'll be my player pool as a little bit of value. Same thing with Darrell Williams. Both of them at very good price points. Rather than $7,000, we can use these two as a little bit of value on the slate. Darrell Williams has 3 receiving touchdowns over his last 3 weeks. He's not getting a ton of touches for this offense. That's why we have him priced there at $3,200. But he's been extremely effective. He's been the running back of choice in the red zone, and that's going to pay huge dividends in Showdown. So I like going to both of them there. If I had to lean one way or the other, I would lean Darrell Williams' way. He's on the winning side. We're expecting more touches for the running backs over there in Kansas City. That's where we're going there. In terms of pure punt plays at running back, not really taking anyone. If I was going to take a pure flyer play, and in my player pool as of right now, I'm only playing 60 lineups tonight. I don't have a reason to go ahead and do so. But if you're playing 150 plus lineups, maybe consider Derek Gore. He did get some touches for the Kansas City Chiefs last week when they were well ahead. Going on to wide receiver, this is where a majority of my ownership is going to be. I'm going to take both of those quarterbacks. I'm going to try to fit in at least 3 of these wide receivers in every lineup. That is something that was the same thing there on Tuesday when we made this video. That has not changed. My favorite wide receiver at this point is Keenan Allen. He is going to be active for tonight. He's $9,400. I like his PPR upside. And anytime we have one of these really high over-under games, particularly the underdogs, we know they're going to have to throw the ball 30, 40, maybe even 50 times tonight. That means Keenan Allen's looking at 12 to 14 plus targets. It's an absolute PPR money machine right there. And if he ends up scoring a touchdown, he'll put up 30 plus fantasy points. So he is my favorite player on the slate at this point. I love using him at captain. As of right now in my cash lineup, I was trying to use Keenan Allen at captain. I ended up having enough salary to spend up for Justin Herbert at captain. But really the projections are that close where just because I was able to fit him in, I went to a Justin Herbert, a little bit of a higher floor. But I was trying to prioritize Keenan Allen first. He would be my second option there. In GPPs, I think he gives you a little bit higher upside. It's obviously a little bit cheaper, gives you an extra $1,200 to $1,400 to spend. And you can use that pretty wisely. Next wide receiver on my board here, I love going to somebody like Brian Pringle down here. Pringle, very nicely priced at $2,600. We already talked about him on Tuesday. Somebody who's getting 60 to 70% of snaps week in and week out. Demarcus Robinson down here, he's a little bit of an X factor. So he's a great blocker for the Chiefs. They love using him from time to time as well, particularly in the red zone. If you're going to go with any value options for the Chiefs, those would be my 2 options. A little bit of preference towards Byron Pringle. Joshua Palmer, he was garnering a lot more ownership at the beginning of the week when we had Keenan Allen on the COVID list. But now that Keenan Allen will be playing, he's likely to only see 20 to 30% of snaps. He will be in my player pool, but is nowhere near the type of play he was earlier on in the week. So you can see he is down as a yes, but nowhere near as convicted as we were on Tuesday. Mikko Hardman's kind of the man out here for the Chiefs. He's seen his snap share decrease as the year has gone on. He's been extremely underproductive, has underwhelmed based on pretty much every metric you can look at. He's at least playing snaps for one of the highest paced teams in the NFL. You can't really say all that too many bad things about him. I mean, he has some speed, he has good hands. He just hasn't been able to take advantage of that. Everyone's been waiting for him to go out, have that really big game, and it just hasn't happened. Same thing with Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's really underperformed this year. Hasn't really had many ceiling games other than the week 2 where he put up 50 fantasy points. Ever since then, I believe his ceiling was right around 27 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp is averaging over 29 fantasy points per game. So that should tell you the kind of year that Tyreek Hill is having. He's really expensive there at $11,400. And frankly, I don't think he's going to make many of my lineups. I'm a huge Tyreek Hill fan. His ceiling is non-existent. He could seriously put up 70, 80 fantasy points any night. But at $11,400, when I'm trying to take both of these quarterbacks in every lineup, it's a really tough ask. I mean, you're having to take at least somebody at $200. And quite frankly, there's not many people at $200 on this slate that I'm even willing to go to. I mean, the only one I have down as a yes right now, he's down as a blank. He's not even down as a yes, would be Blake Bell, just because it's a tight end on a showdown slate. Let's move down to the tight end position. I like the tight ends just as much as these wide receivers. Similar reason there, getting that PPR upside. The only issue is they have a little bit of lower usage rates. That's just part of the natural progression of the position. You're not going to see 10 plus targets as a tight end very often. Darren Waller might once or twice a year, whereas somebody like a Keenan Allen is doing that week in and week out. So in Draftkings, where we're looking for that PPR upside, you're getting a full point on Draftkings DFS. Really does differentiate the player pool there. So for me, Travis Kelce, I'll have him in my player pool. I'll have him at captain. I mean, he's one of those big 3 for the Chiefs. You can never go wrong there. He's a little bit more expensive than I'd like. And quite frankly, Keenan Allen is just a much better play. I have him projected higher. Also has a much higher floor. So for a core build, he's not somebody that would make that core. But if you're playing a large field GPP, definitely go ahead and mix them in. Jared Cook and Donald Parham are great options, particularly Donald Parham. Parham's pretty much the 1B tight end for this team. I wouldn't even really say that Jared Cook's the starting tight end. Parham's been more utilized in the red zone. He has a lot of setup plays for him, like fade plays in the red zone. If you guys have watched his games this year. And while he hasn't had massive usage to this point, it is clear that he is a future and a focal point of that offense going forward. They love his ball skills. As soon as Jared Cook retires, which I expect that to be this year, he's going to take over as their number one tight end. And clearly they're trying to get him ready for that. So at $2,400, he could very well go out and score a touchdown today, and I would not be surprised. Don't go wild, though. Don't go putting him at the captain slot. Even though he is really cheap, we need to make sure that we're getting some of those raw points at captain. We're going to need 20, maybe even 30 plus points at captain to get by tonight, 40, 50 points in terms of the captain boost to really get by. We'll talk about these two Chiefs tight ends. They are pure punt plays. They're not going to be in my pool. Again, I'm only playing 60 lineups, so it's not going to be necessary. But if you're full field, 150 maxing, that kind of thing, go ahead and put one or two shares of both these guys in your lineups. They could go out and score a touchdown. But aside from that, not going to go ahead and pay it off. Defenses, I want no part of. We talked about this on Tuesday, particularly now that the over-under is at 55 points, even more so an issue. The kickers, on the other hand, get more and more attractive. Anytime you have a high over-under game, one of the more underrated positions is kicker, because let's say that the over-under doesn't end up getting hit. It gets up being under that total. Most of the time, it's because red zone production isn't there. It's because they're settling for field goals rather than touchdowns. It has a drastic effect on the over-under. We know both of these teams are going to get yardage. We know both of them are going to move the ball pretty much at will against these defenses. The key is whether they score touchdowns. So if it ends up being a little bit of a lower scoring game, it is a very, very good possibility that it's because of these kickers getting 4 or 5 field goals apiece. So definitely love both the kickers. If you wanted to go crazy tonight, and this is probably the only time this year, I'll say this, you could play one at captain. It happens about once a year in fantasy. Defense at captain is much more rare than that. It happens about once every year and a half. Once every 2 years is about the spontaneity of that. Kickers, though, can definitely be an optimal. With a 60-point total, though, it's not as likely. But if this ends up being a lower scoring game, you have that type of hunch. I personally don't. Obviously, I don't have them at the captain slot there. But if you're thinking a little bit outside the box, you think it's going to be a lower scoring game, that could be the optimal lineup there. Let's talk about some of the captains that I like. Let's go ahead and go through some of the game theory involved with it. You can't go wrong with either quarterback at captain, particularly Justin Herbert. He's going to be playing from behind most likely here. He's going to be throwing the ball an absolute ton, and they run the ball less than the Chiefs. The Chiefs still have some semblance of a running game, but outside Austin Eckler, particularly when he went down last week, they went to almost an entirely pass-heavy approach over there in LA. So like Justin Herbert a whole lot, game script isn't really going to affect him. Austin Eckler is an interesting option, right? Earlier on in the week when he was 11% plus owned, was a little bit less attractive, but now that the field is seemingly a little bit worried about playing him, that makes him a little bit more attractive in my book. So we'll be in my player pool. Tyreek Hill, I'm going to have 1 or 2 shares just in case he goes off for 50, 60 fantasy points. I couldn't live with myself if he went out and do that. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. Just hasn't quite had the year we expected. Keenan Allen, already on record as saying he's my favorite play on the slate. I'm looking at about 40% ownership at captain for him. I'm 100% across all of my lineups. I will have 100% Justin Herbert, 100% Patrick Mahomes, and 100% Keenan Allen tonight. So you guys always ask for what my core is. That's my core. Filling it in otherwise, with that type of cost, let's see, that's almost $31,000, $500 between the three of them. I'm looking at $19,000 for my last 3 spots. You're looking at value, right? Where I'm not fitting in much Austin Eckler. We're not fitting in any Tyreek Hill in those type of lineups. In my main GPP, where I have 60 lineups, right? So if we're opening up the core a little bit, you're going to see Patrick Mahomes swipe out of some of those lineups. Somebody like an Austin Eckler coming in with some of our Chargers heavy lineups, right? If we're talking 4 or 5 Chargers, rather than something like a 3-on-3 like I have in my cash lineup, that's when we're going to start to get the Ecklers, and the Mahomes is going to go out. That's where we might be able to sneak in a Tyreek Hill rather than a Patrick Mahomes, that kind of thing. But my core is going to be both quarterbacks and Keenan Allen for a majority of my lineups. A few other things to discuss. If you're looking at a cash build, definitely need to both have both quarterbacks. That is not debatable. Outside that, though, you can open it up a little bit, right? There's some of these cheaper running back options that I wouldn't be opposed going to. Keenan Allen is very safe in cash as well, not just if you're going to a large field GPP. You would want to avoid players in this mid-tier at wide receiver, right? Like a Mikko Hardman, a Jalen Guyton, a Byron Pringle. Those guys are just a little bit too volatile for cash. So, right, you want to stick to some of the more expensive players on the slate, and then mix it in with more of the surefire value, right? Something like a Donald Parham, something like these kickers. These kickers are great value plays tonight. They're going to have an extremely high floor anytime you have such a high over-under. So in cash, these kickers are actually some of my favorite plays on the slate. And that's all we've got here for tonight, guys. We already went over most of this on Tuesday. Just wanted to go over some of the updates that we've had throughout the slate. If you guys are watching this on replay and you have any questions or any lineup questions or comparisons you guys want me to go through, go ahead and throw those down in the chat. Good luck with all of your lineups for tonight, and let's get this cash.